Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Brawley City Council and successor agency to Brawley Community Redevelopment Agency. This is our special meeting agenda for Tuesday, May the 4th, 2021 at 5 p.m. It's 5:18 now. It's at City Council Chambers, 383 Main Street in Brawley. We'll have the roll call.
The minutes will reflect all council members present.
Thank you, Lorena. All right, let's all stand for the invocation. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful to you tonight for the safekeeping that we've had and the fact that we're coming out of this pandemic. We ask that you would be present with us in this meeting tonight as we try to guide our city financially. We thank you for the team of leadership that we've had rising up in our city, and for the new direction that we're going. We ask that you would just fill us with your spirit of wisdom, that we would guide our city in the right way and in a way that is forward-thinking and that will bring about good results for years to come. We ask that you would continue to keep your hand of protection upon our city, upon our safety services and our city employees. We thank you for each one that puts in their time and effort for our city to make it a better place. And we ask that you would just continue to keep us all safe. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Okay. Tyler, would you lead us in the pledge?
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, item 1, approval of the agenda.
George, I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item carries. Item number 2, public appearances and comments not to exceed 4 minutes. This is the time for the public to address the council on any item not appearing on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. Is there anyone here to give a public comment?
Hi, Gil Robler, Brawley resident. I come to you today as I'm be going around the town, cities, and the valley, introducing myself as the County of Imperial's Public Information Officer. Has a nice ring to it, right? And I figure why not come before my hometown and also among many who have, all of you have supported me since day one, but to show in an effort to show collaboration that the county is here to support in the messaging, as we saw with in the pandemic in the past year, messaging through traditional and new media and social media was key. Andrea has been doing a great job, but yeah, just to show support, introduce myself in this new role and how I can support. Supervisor Kelly is very engaged, so I don't think I'll be having to come here as I've often seen him here many times, informing you all what's going on with the county. But yeah, looking forward to help the residents of Brawley and the Imperial County. Also to promote, I know Esperanza Colio Warren, Deputy CEO, want to make a comment. She was unable to make it, but right now the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program, the county has been allocated quite a bit of funds and only a fraction of them have been utilized. So we're really trying to get the word out on those who have had trouble paying their rent. There's a rental relief program put on by the state. I'll leave some flyers here in English and Spanish, but obviously utilizing you as messengers, the community, your staff departments to get the word out on this program for those who have struggled with their rent over the past year. So just want to come introduce myself to you all in this new role and look forward to working with you all into this road to recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil.
Thank you, Gilly.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Noel Ortiz. I'm the chairman of the Brawley Merchant Association. We just created it about 2 weeks ago. We're looking for further support. We have here Mr. Raymond Castro as a liaison. We have identified a few projects that we're able to handle. I believe it's a business directory, and we're just asking for further support.
Very
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, consent agenda. Items are approved by one motion. Council members or members of the public may request consent items be considered separately at a time determined by the mayor. Do I have,
George, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
okay. Have a second?
I'll second. Or, we have 3 seconds.
That was 2 seconds later.
I heard Donnie's voice first.
Oh, Donnie was first. I thought you were first.
You just prefer to hear his voice.
I don't have that smooth voice that he's one and only, made for TV.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item 4, general fund workshop. 4A, we will review, discuss, and provide additional direction on the 2021-2022 preliminary proposed general fund budget study session presented by Carla Romero, our finance director, and backup is on pages 38 through 75.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Carla Romero, Finance Director for the city. This is the first of 4 budget study sessions that we will be having for our upcoming budget cycle, which is for fiscal year 21-22. I am going to try really, really hard to avoid acronyms. You'll see throughout the document I put a lot of notes, and there's a lot of parentheses of acronyms because they just kind of roll off the tongue. But I will try really, really hard not to incorporate those into my verbal discussions. And then I will certainly pause and take any questions throughout the presentation as it's fresh in your mind. So don't hesitate to do so. Before I start the presentation, I really want to thank our city manager for taking the time to share his vast knowledge of all of the city's finances with me and share all of that, the past history that has got us here today, and all of our directors and managers for their historical knowledge of the operations, answering my many, many phone calls and emails throughout the last few weeks, and for them working together to find solutions to some of the issues that we are having. And also for understanding when the answer was, I'm sorry, I can't include that in this year's budget. So we had a lot of discussion to get to this point. And so I just want to really thank everybody for that time that they did behind the scenes, because it doesn't go without being noticed. So next slide there. Thank you, Armando. Armando's going to help me navigate my slides here. So today's presentation is going to focus on the general fund. It is the city's main operational fund. We're going to talk about revenues. We're going to talk about expenses. We're going to talk about what's changed from last fiscal year, or this fiscal year that we are currently finishing up, as opposed to next fiscal year. We'll also talk about the assumptions that were made in this proposed budget. We're going to review all of the major variances for both revenues and expenses. We have our departments here, directors and managers, that will help answer any of those operational questions that you might have as the presentation unfolds. And we'll also discuss the deferred expenses, which total a little over $1 million, what they mean, what was deferred, and why. We'll also talk about one-time funding for the American Rescue Plan funds that we know the city will be allocated, half this year and then half the following fiscal year. And again, what that means to the city and why those have not been incorporated right now into the budget. And then we'll also review pending items that we have for both revenues and expenses as we go through the presentation. So again, the presentation does include a minor surplus, but it is not one to be wholeheartedly celebrated at this point, because as we go through the presentation, what you'll notice is that we do have those deferred requests. And we have one position that is being requested to be funded, but we had 6 total requests, and we said no to 5 at this point. And we also have pending labor agreements that are under negotiation that have not been incorporated into the current budget. So let's talk a little bit about what has changed. We have a new city manager that is sitting with us today. He was the previous finance director, so there is some continuity there, as I mentioned earlier. We also have some new directors and managers and changes in those key positions. And so we have a lot of new ideas, a lot of synergy and enthusiasm for what the city has to offer in its future to its residents. We also have a new financial software. We just went live last week. Literally, as we were printing the budget document, it was created in the new system, and we are going live at the same time, so there was a lot of A lot going on in finance last week, that's for sure. But the new financial software, we did add some additional notes for transparency and again, communicating those variances to the public and to you to provide you guidance during this budget study session. We'll continue to do that for all of the funds and also incorporate them into the final budget document as they evolve. The other thing that the financial software does is that it provides us new applications. New applications will allow us increased tracking and reporting that the city is able to do. So we're able to track our purchase orders electronically and provide services electronically to residents for utility billing. So we're really, really happy, and we're hoping to bring you a presentation just on that component because I could talk about it for hours, but I won't do that tonight. And then we also have COVID-19. A year ago, you guys were here and you were talking about staying at home, shuttering, closing businesses. Today, we're here to talk about there's vaccines available and we're reopening is on the horizon. The only bad news is that, again, we don't have firm state guidance. About a year ago, we didn't have firm guidance on how long we would be closed. Now we don't have firm guidance on, what does June 15th look like? What does reopening mean? And so we've tried our best to incorporate what we think reopening will look like and what we might need to do that into this year's budget, but those may change as those guidance continue to evolve. So next slide, Armando. So we'll dive right in. We'll talk about some numbers. We'll start off with our general fund revenues. And what we'll do when we talk about revenues is we'll focus on the ones that have the major year-over-year change. So the first one, of course, is our tax revenue. Tax revenue is about $10.9 million of the total $17.2 million, and that's 64% of the total. But the top four revenues, which we'll talk about when we get to the next slide, make up 57%. And so those are the ones that we'll focus on when we talk about those revenue sources. If we go down a little bit, grants, we have a reduction in our grants. We did have some one-time monies for our housing element updates incorporated into this year's budget. And so grants are typically one-time and will fluctuate from year to year. The city will continue to look for additional grants. Other agencies are also finalizing their budgets during this time. And so we keep reaching out to them and applying and seeing if we can increase that again. We also have a decrease in fees and charges, and this is largely related to the financial software that I just mentioned earlier that was implemented. There was some one-time implementation cost associated with that, and they were charged throughout the departments, and so we see a reduction there of about $75,000 of that is related to that financial software one-time cost. And then down at the bottom, we'll talk a lot about these transfers in and what they mean, but the bulk of that reduction is tied to the pension obligation bond. And so what we're seeing here with our revenues is that most of them have a gradual recovery based on a reopening plan of state guidelines diminishing, us being able to slowly reopen. We are nearing pre-pandemic levels for like our sales tax revenue, and so that's really, really great news. And of course, the budget is always a moving target, and we'll always continuously monitor and adjust that as new information evolves. I am proposing to do quarterly budget reports as well next fiscal year, again, just to be able to continually provide the state of the city's budget and how we're doing as we go along. Next slide, please, Armando. So our general fund revenues, let's talk a little bit about those top four revenues. Thank you for that. The top four make up 90% of our total tax revenue. So again, remember the tax revenue on the previous slide was $10.9 million, and 90% of that is made up of these top four revenue sources. Sales tax is 26%, property tax 23%, the VLF, which is vehicle license fee, is 23%, and UUT, utility user tax, is 17%. So we're going to talk about each one of these. Our sales tax revenue is estimated at $2.9 million, right below pre-pandemic levels. Again, the sales tax rate for the city is 7.75%, with 1% of that 7.75% allocated to the city. So what we're seeing here is an increase of almost $640,000 in our sales tax revenue. This city is not didn't experience such a big fluctuation because we don't have a lot, we're not close to the border, and so we're seeing that we're doing a little bit better than we anticipated, and we're also not seeing a ton of businesses that have just shut down completely, but we do have a minimum wage increase that is coming in January. And of course, those businesses are also awaiting state guidance to fully reopen. So we're cautiously optimistic. This is a good projection for our sales tax revenue.
Just on
Yes.
that topic, is still just past maybe pre-pandemic sales tax, and one of the big drivers was just gasoline and gas sales. Is that still the case, do you know, or of the breakdown of sales tax? Is that still one of the big contributors? My concern was
is.
last year when everything kind of came to a standstill, we'd see a big interruption there, but it doesn't look like
Right.
that has happened.
No.
I have a question as well. With respect to like the sales tax, I know that are we collecting it now? I mean, is it being sent back from the state? I know there was a period of time where it wasn't. The collection by the state was delayed, right? And so I don't know if that's still the case
Yeah,
now.
so some businesses were allowed to defer
Uh-huh.
their sales tax, but we've realized that a lot of them didn't.
Okay.
Because they knew they were going to have to pay it.
They're
And
getting
when
a
you're the
jam, right?
state
Uh-huh.
and you're
Yeah.
pretty big and you can pull those licenses, you're probably going to pay your sales tax revenue pretty quickly.
Okay.
And so we're not seeing large dips in that
Thank you.
category. And sorry, and I forgot to mention, the revenue projections are detailed starting on page 46 of the agenda packet, if anybody from the audience would like to follow along with the details of the projections. We are also seeing that our property tax revenue, there are 5 total line items in property tax revenue, and they total a little over $2.5 million. And we're seeing a combined increase of about $153,000. Property tax revenues have a 2-year lag in any fluctuations. And so we're not seeing housing prices decline. We're not seeing that type of dip, and so we do have an increase. The biggest increase here, though, is what's called RPTTF, Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund. What happened is at the Court of Appeals, there was a case called the Chula Vista versus Sandoval case, which basically reallocated the way everyone across the state distributed their RPTTF, and it's tied to redevelopment dissolution law. All the different counties within the state of California were doing this formula different, and the courts came in and said, you have to do it all uniform because it's all tied to dissolution law for the state of California. For this particular county, that meant that less money went to the county and more money came to the cities. Other counties, it was the opposite, where less money went to the cities and more money went to the counties. So good news is we're getting a little bit more money. Bad news is they're not giving us a retro on all of those years.
Of course not.
I didn't think so.
But we'll take what we can get.
Yeah. Why would they do that?
Yeah, VLF, Vehicle License Fee Swap. This is another state takeaway. Back in 2004, there was a 2004 Budget Act, and I won't tell you everything that was happening, but basically the state was having some sort of budgetary issues, and they swapped vehicle license fee revenue for a portion of property tax revenue. And so it was also tied to the ERAF, if you remember that, the Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. And this is where you get to say, thank goodness we don't have to remember all of that. But we are seeing a minor increase in that. And again, it's tied to property values and property taxes. And then our utility user tax is still estimated at 1.9%. We have not incorporated any changes to the current tax rate or the taxes being collected at this point in time. Next slide, Armando. So we still have some revenue adjustments. On the left there are pending adjustments that we know we still have to make, and on the right are potential adjustments. And I'll explain the difference. The pending adjustments are ones that we know we have to still incorporate in the budget. Again, the American Rescue Plan. It's one-time funding. It is going to be given to us in 2 tranches, one this year and one next year, equally divided. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And those expenses do need to be used by December 31st of 2024. Then we have some grant funding. The city did receive some utility assistance grant funding, and we haven't expensed it all. So we're going to try to repush that message, get as much out as we can before June 30th. But if there's any left over, we still want to rebudget that and get that out to the residents that need that assistance that have been impacted by COVID. If you want more information, please call the finance department. Our phone number is 760-344-8941. We are happy to help you through that process. And then we also have,
Sorry.
go ahead.
practice social distancing here. I'm using the mic. Just for clarification on that utility assistance, Councilmember Nava, that was one of the initial
CARES Act.
CARES Act funding that's for the senior citizens for the help with the utility. And that was a long, as you recall, it was a long process dealing with the state, and we finally were able to get that funding. So that's what she's referring to there.
Fantastic. And that's been discussed for like 6 months now, right?
At least,
Yeah.
yep, at least.
So we still have some monies, so please contact us if you need that assistance.
Let's make sure we message that too. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome, yes. And then we also have, under fees and charges, we have the administrative overhead for the enterprise funds. We did not finish allocating this because it's based on all of the other funds and those expenditures and revenues, and those aren't fully done. Those will be in the next study session, so we'll have some firmed up numbers for that. And it also depends on the final general fund numbers as well, which of course are a moving target at this point. But what we did incorporate was what was in there for last year, but you'll see a zero year-over-year change at this point. And then under potential adjustments, we are seeing that we could potentially do a minor increase to our construction permits, but again, we kind of paused and waited on this because it is dependent upon construction, and what we're seeing is labor shortages and rising prices. And so we don't know if that will continue at the pace that it is currently at, but we are talking to the building associations and trying to figure out what their projections are for that, but that might lead to a minor increase before the budget is adopted. And again, we are continuing to seek grants. We have put into this proposed grant our firm grants that we have already confirmed. But again, other associations are still developing their budgets. Both the county and the state agencies continue to give us their firm commitments for those grants. And as those fluctuate, we'll continue to change those into our budget. And then, of course, the governor is expected to have a May revised budget. Usually doesn't impact the general fund, usually impacts the gas tax fund and other funds, but we'll continue to monitor that as well. So this slide, we'll spend a little bit of time in here on this particular slide, and we're talking about transfers in, which are revenues, and then we're going to talk about pensions, which are expenses. So our transfers in, remember, are that big final last negative category in our revenues, and a large portion of that is attributed to the pension obligation bond. The pension obligation bond was issued back in 2017, and it has a debt service schedule for principal and interest. And so this next fiscal year, the principal and interest payment is decreasing by $417,452. And so what happens is that this particular decrease is tied to revenues and expenses because they're allocated amongst the departments. So when you look at the departments, you'll see 3 different pension expenses. You'll see what's called this pension obligation. You'll see PERS, which is the biweekly payroll, and then you see that unfunded liability. The entire pension obligation bond payment is under the non-departmental budget. So basically the revenues and expenses within the departments wash themselves out, but the savings overall is $417,452. And then we also have not incorporated any transfer in from the Highway Relinquishment Fund. We this year have a budget of $104,626. Those are restricted for road repairs, maintenance, and maybe some salary and benefits associated with those types of services. But at this point, we have not incorporated any type of a transfer in from that particular fund. And then we also have a transfer or a operating fund in from the successor agency, which is related to the former redevelopment agency. The Department of Finance has approved the recognized obligation payment schedule for fiscal year 21-22, and they do have an administration oversight transfer that they give the city for redevelopment dissolution. It's $25,000 per year. We are exploring the thought of doing a last and final ROPS. We do only have one bond within the redevelopment agency dissolution, the successor agency, and it does expire in the year 2036. And so what happens is that every year we have to formally go to you as a successor agency, and then go to the county, and then go to the state. And at this point, since we only have one bond, we should really explore the idea of filing a last and final and not have, and just get everything, all of the repayments set until 2036. So we'll come back to you and explore that as well during next fiscal year. And we also have 6 assessment districts, and there's a minor overall increase of about $6,566 as a transfer in. Again, those assessment districts help support and are set up for fire, police, and parks. And so as we see those costs increasing, we did have a minor increase in that transfer in from those assessment districts. So now we're going to talk a little bit about pensions. And the reason we're going to spend a little bit of time here is because overall these 3 categories equate to $2,766,625 in next fiscal year's budget. And that is before we have any labor adjustments. So as salaries continue to increase, some of these will also continue to increase, especially that middle one there with the public employees retirement system. That's the biweekly contribution. So we already talked about the top one, which is the pension obligation bond. The middle one is tied, again, the pension obligation bond payment, is $1,157,000. And then the middle one is tied to the biweekly payroll. So that's about $941,000 right now in the current proposed budget. We have 5 different tiers. And this is the city's portion, not the employee portion, only the city portion. And those tiers range between 7.59% of salaries all the way to 23.71%, just depending if you're non-sworn, public safety, miscellaneous. And so you can only imagine the bear of having to do salary and benefit projections with 4 different labor groups, 5 different CalPERS tiers, multiple, medical benefits. I think that's the most complicated part of this budget process. And then we have what's called the unfunded accrued liability, also tied to CalPERS. The unfunded accrued liability payment is $667,720 for next fiscal year, and that is an increase of $213,267 over this fiscal year. As of June 30th of 2020, the unfunded pension liability collectively for the city was at about $7.4 million. So what this unfunded accrued liability payment does is that it's tied to that unfunded liability. CalPERS does projections for the city, and they go up 5 years out, and they let us know how much we anticipate this payment to continue to increase. CalPERS is currently doing what's called an ALM cycle, Asset Liability Management Cycle. That cycle is done every 4 years, and what it does is it looks at this unfunded accrued liability and determines if the cities need to pay more, all agencies, city special districts. What they look at is they look at mortality rates, they look at investment returns, they look at what the current salaries are, ranges for cities, and then they determine, do we need to ask agencies to contribute more so that we can fulfill the commitment for the pensions that we have that we have promised our employees.
That's their actuarial study. So
it's their actuarial
It's a 4-year
study.
cycle.
Yes. And so that is supposed to end in August with some projections coming in November, and then those adjustments will be incorporated into the 22-23 budget.
And it never goes down.
It never goes down,
No.
and we already know that they're not hitting their investment return target. So if that gets lowered, this payment will continue to increase, possibly at a higher rate than this. So it is something that we are monitoring as well. And again, these aren't payments that we can say we don't want to make.
Yeah.
We have to make these payments.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand them and track them and keep an eye on what's happening at the state level and how it's impacting our organization. Next slide, Armando, thank you. So let's shift from revenues and continue to talk about expenditures. On the left, what you have there is a graph, a pie chart that illustrates our different departments. And on the right, you have the same information, just with the total dollar value and then also the percentage of the total budget. The one line item administration, which is about the middle of on the right there, that does include our city manager's budget, our city clerk, human resources, and the city attorney all combined into one. And what we'll note here is that police and fire do make up 54% of that total pie.
54. Public safety, 54%.
So if we go to the next slide, we'll dive a little bit deeper into these expense. We'll go over the increases first, and then we'll go over the reductions. And before the beginning of the meeting, I passed out this amended schedule. And so these numbers, the variances that are noted here are in this document. So if you want to follow along, we'll do the increases, and that's where they're coming from, increases and then decreases. And then this amended document will also be a part of the final record as well. So if you're looking at your agenda packet, our city manager's detailed budget is on page 52. And we are seeing a positive or an increased variance from the budget of about $45,000. The big bulk of that is tied to salary, health benefits, and the CalPERS UAL payment, the unfunded accrued liability payment. The city manager is not getting paid $35,000 more. He was allocated in the finance department, and so those health benefits are now shifting. The previous city manager did not take those benefits, whereas our current city manager does, and that is the bulk of what that increase is. And again, that unfunded accrued liability payment, not something that we can say no to, but it is allocated amongst the departments based on salaries. So we're seeing an increase there. So you'll see a decrease in health benefits and finance, and then a shift to this particular department because your current finance director only has one person under health benefits versus a family. And then also the city manager said, we need to pay someone move-up pay to do our social media, but that particular person reports to him under those duties, and he didn't want to put that move-up pay in that other department, which is under planning, and so it is associated with his budget. Doesn't mean he's getting move-up pay again. That is for another city employee performing those duties. And then under utility billing, we'll see that detailed budget on page 54. We are seeing an increase of about $53,000. We do have a new employee that is largely allocated to is fully allocated actually to utility billing, and that person does receive the health benefits. So again, you see a big increase there. We only budget when employees have signed up for the health benefit, and so that's why you see changes in those year over year. And we have had some turnover in that staff. We also have an increase in merchant fees, rents, and leases of about $42,000. What we're seeing right now with utility customers and the pandemic is that they want to continue to pay those services online, and we want to continue to offer those. Our new financial system will allow us to do e-billing, will allow us to process payments through Lockbox, which is when they go directly to the bank and the bank transfers over a file to us, versus us having to manually open up all the mail and process the payments. And so we want to take advantage of some of those efficiencies and be able to process payments quicker and provide additional services to our utility customers that will continue to augment what it is that we're already doing. And then we also have some savings that offset those increases of about $8,000, and that had to do with an AC that went down in this fiscal year in the finance department. And so that was replaced and not anticipated for next year. Then if we look at the building inspection budget, that's on page 64. We have a minor an increase of $40,608. And that's because this is where we have 50% of the new proposed position allocated. So we are proposing a new building inspector position, and half of those salary and benefits would be about $35,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about personnel changes in an upcoming slide, but since we're here, this particular position was really fought for, and the reason it was really fought for and it ended up being incorporated is because our directors collectively said we really need some help with homelessness, we need some help with community cleanup, proactive engagement with our businesses and our residents, and we also need assistance with routine building inspections and getting those out. We're also hoping that this particular person can help our fire department with those inspections as well. And so together, this position is split 50-50 between building inspections and community development, but it will help in various areas and also work with police and fire if it is approved and incorporated into the final budget. So we have an increased graffiti abatements budget is on page 61. It is a part of the police budget. There is no particular budget for this department in this year's budget, and we did incorporate one into next year to continue to provide graffiti abatement. And then parks, that detailed budget is on page 69. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I know this is a little awkward. One area, the graffiti abatement is currently budgeted of what we're doing now, but Carla and I anticipate that this probably is going to be one area that's going to come back in the final budget that's going to be increased due to its importance and the value there. So I would expect to see an increase in this area in the future. I mean, for this next fiscal year, but in the final budget. We're still working through that.
Maybe you can tag in a new number.
Yeah.
Tag that.
Yes, we did increase the salaries associated with this, but we're hoping we can add more, yes. Parks budget is detailed starting on page 69 of the agenda packet. Again, we have a manager that has been hired for Parks and Recreation. However, the current budget does not have that management position incorporated in it, and so we've added it into next year's budget. We do have some operational increases of about $42,000, and that has to do with supplies and maintenance and reopening of our city facilities. And then the recreation, the Lion Center, that detailed budget is on page 71. This one, we are seeing a larger budget variance of about $169,000. Again, 50% of the management position. We do have temporary salaries that are increasing at about $80,000, but may not even be quite enough because we do have the minimum wage salary adjustment that we discussed earlier being triggered in January. And if you go into the budget details, we didn't go all the way up to where it was in 1819, where those actuals were. It just depends on what that reopening looks like and what services we can provide. And so this is definitely a moving target within this budget. And operationally, we're also seeing that if we open up the Lion Center, I had a discussion with Rachel and said, we need to look about ventilation and filtration and purifiers. And so there's all of these COVID-related reopening costs that we wouldn't have had otherwise, that we're having to think about and incorporate into our expense projections in order to be able to reopen safely for the community. And then we have our Senior Citizen Center budget, starts on page 73. We're seeing, again, an increase there. We have increased temporary salaries, partially because of the minimum wage increase, but also to be able to reopen that facility. And again, operationally, we would need to assess that and make sure that we are COVID-friendly and ready to open as well. And we're anticipating some increased janitorial expenses as well within that budget. So I want to pause there, and I want to be able to have you ask any questions of operationally of any of these departments that you might have. So.
How much of that, all these retrofits and measures that we need to take due to COVID are covered by COVID relief funds of some kind?
None of them at this point. So the FEMA has, after February, I think it was 9th or 10th, or sorry, September, they basically said COVID is now the new normal. And that is your new operating expenses, and not even FEMA is reimbursing. And the American Rescue Plan money is not intended for that purpose either. And so the one-time CARES Act money has been fully spent as of December 31st of 2020. So there are no offsetting revenues for those additional expenditures.
Unfunded mandate.
Yeah. Any idea what that cost is?
Carla, I can give a
go
general idea.
Yeah,
So
it's
if we
pretty
just
big.
take the CARES Act money that the City of Brawley did receive was approximately $337,000 and change. That is mostly all been spent on operational COVID-related items, with some being for employees being out due to COVID and everything. So in the general fund alone, we're probably estimating $200 to $300K. Rough figures.
Yeah. And some of those would be one-time, like partitions at the library. I know we've had good discussion with Chris about, having to put up plexiglass like this in order to serve or in between the computers. But then who knows if we have to take it down and, how long that would stay up or if we need to replace it at a certain point because it gets damaged. And so I can't tell you if that's going to be an ongoing expenditure or if that's a one-time expenditure, but some of those have been incorporated into the budget in order to even allow us to consider reopening at this point.
Carla, just to jump back, still on expense variance here, on just the three buckets, the three combined buckets, and I'm just going to use the round number that you did on the pension obligation and PERS, our PERS and our UAL, our liability there, was about a collective 2 million. Is that 2 million increase, or is what's the differential? What are we going estimated to go up from?
Well, the pension obligation bond went down, the
Right.
417,000,
Right.
but then the unfunded accrued liability went up by 214.
Yeah.
The middle bucket, that pension
Yeah.
bucket, we don't know yet because we still have those labor negotiations. And so overall, the CalPERS rates aren't changing,
Yeah.
but the total amount allocated to the city portion will change as we hopefully bring back unfreeze merits and whatnot. And so I don't have a final number for you. At this point, we're seeing savings.
Yeah. But you
But
wanted to get, for
it'll-
information, us an idea
Right.
of what the total liability looks like for that, for all three. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
yes. Just because it's such a large portion of the budget, we should
Yeah.
really talk about that.
Thank you.
Good question. I can have a firm answer for you once we have labor negotiations done. All right. Next slide, Armando. Let's talk about some savings. So there's some good news. We do have some savings. There's a savings of about almost $46,686 exactly in personnel, and that's associated with professional services. You'll see that the original budget was lower in this particular line item, which is, on page 55, than it is in the current budget, and there's a variance there. Again, that speaks to the budget being this breathing, living document, and what we're hoping is that next year we don't need these professional services, which are tied to workers' comp cases or other personnel assistance that is needed. Then we also have in information technology, we have a savings of $45,837, and this is tied to technical savings, which is again for our financial system. We had the one-time expenses for implementation, and then we also have that offset with an increase of equipment, and that's tied to some cybersecurity augmentation that we would like to implement. And then under the non-departmental, that budget again is detailed on page 59. We have the pension obligation bond savings, which makes up all of the savings basically within this department. And then on page 68, we have community development detailed. We're seeing a minor savings, and the reason I wanted to highlight this is because, again, 50% of that new building inspector position is allocated here, and it's offset by savings in professional services tied to the housing element that is updated every 5 years or 7 years. Where are you, Gordon? Oh, of course. So the housing element is updated every, Gordon, 5 years, 7 years? 8 years, sorry. And so we did have some one-time grant funding for that, but that is going away, and so we do have some savings there. The police budget is detailed on page 60. We're seeing some savings here, but they're a little deceptive. So I wanted to take a moment and talk about police and fire and why we're seeing some decreases here. We are not changing the staffing in police or fire. What we're seeing here is, again, tied to the pension obligation bond payment. So the majority of those salaries are in police and fire. Remember, we talked about 54% of the budget is police and fire. So these are the two departments that are also seeing the biggest savings from that pension obligation debt decreasing. And then we do have some overtime savings of about $45,000. And then we also had some increases overall in salaries, PERS, and the unfunded accrued liability payment of $220,000 for $478. And then we also had some operational increases of about $44,000. So savings and then increases. So altogether, though, you'll see a savings of $25,000. Same thing with fire. The fire's budget is detailed on page 62. We have some savings here, and these are mostly also tied to the pension obligation payment. You'll see savings of about $216,000, savings in overtime of about $56,000, and then we see some savings in operational cost as well. We have had some one-time apparatus maintenance that needed to be done this year that we were not anticipating, and so you'll see those as ongoing savings for next year. The engineering budget is on page 66. And what you'll see here is you'll see savings of about $28,000. The bulk of that is professional services of about $62,000, and then we have an increase in cleaning fees, again associated with safe reopening and COVID, and making sure that we are cleaning facilities properly. And then we also have an increase in vehicle leases to add a lease within that department. And then in library services, we have a decrease as well, and that budget is detailed starting on page 74. We have a decrease in temporary salaries because at this point we have not incorporated opening the Del Rio facility because we want to focus on the main library, get that open, get it right, and then our new library manager should be starting here soon at the middle of May. Give that person some time to learn and run and figure out what that looks like. And so we're anticipating that come mid-year, we'll be talking about that facility, or as the budget happens. I mean, we meet every 2 weeks, and we can talk about it at any point in time and adjust that. And we may be able to adjust it too before the budget is adopted. But at this point, the salaries are not there for that facility. Sure. And then operationally, we do have an increase here of about $10,523. And again, that's tied to COVID, being COVID ready for our main library to get that back up and running and put in those partitions. And I don't know if we need temperature checks or signage. There's just a lot to consider as we're doing that. Let's go over personnel changes. Again, we already talked about the Parks and Recs manager being added into the budget, the building inspector, that is the new position. There are no layoffs or changes in current position or staffing levels incorporated into the budget, and we hope not to do that. We do have part-time staff that we have increased again in the rec and line center in order to reopen that facility. That was an $80,000 increase. And then we have increased hours for the library staff in order to open the library, and those were largely offset by savings due to a recent retirement and turnover in that staff. And so you'll see a reduction in library even though we're opening the library, and just some changes in the positions there within that department. And next slide. Sorry. So we still have some adjustments that are also pending on the expense side. On the left, we have what we have already incorporated into the budget, and then on the right, what is still pending. So on the left, we talk about reopening facilities. We've tried to incorporate as much as we know now into the current budget. We've tried to identify as many efficiencies, collaborate within the city departments to have the library, parks and recs open back up. Even our own, plan checking or finance, we're trying to figure all of that out and see what does reopening look like for our particular departments. We are also talking to other external agencies. What are they doing? What are their lessons learned, and how can we incorporate those into our operational decisions as we make those going forward? And of course, we're always looking at COVID-19 guidelines as they change from the state and incorporating that into what it is that we are doing. Sometimes it's okay to be a little bit late because we can learn from others, and then hopefully not have as many expenses and find some efficiencies. So we're definitely learning from our neighbors. We also have, again, those COVID-related expenses that have increased throughout the departments. Again, there's no offsetting revenue, as mentioned earlier, and they are just considered the new normal, and they've been incorporated in the budget. So what's pending on the right, we do have our workers' compensation insurance. I did actually receive our final numbers recently, just Monday, actually Sunday night. Too late for this particular item, but we'll be incorporating those. those rates. So what we did is we used last year's rates right now, and then going over the rates that were provided and seeing how would those affect the budget going forward. And then CalPERS hasn't given us their final health plan rates. Those typically increase year over year, and those increases have not been incorporated either into the budget. And again, as mentioned earlier, there are 4 labor associations that we are currently negotiating with, and those changes have not been incorporated into the budget, but we are hoping to be able to do so rather quickly here. And then also we have the unrepresented employees that we also need to take a look at as we finalize negotiations with the bargaining units. So overall, bottom line numbers, we do have an initial surplus of $188,337. Again, a win, yes, but not a final number. We just talked a lot about what needs to be changed. And we do have these deferred expenses of over $1 million, and we have this American Rescue Plan. We are getting a little bit more than this. We're getting $4.9 million, but we've already identified $3.5 million of expenses that would qualify under that particular funding source. And so if we had incorporated all of those into the initial budget, we would have had a deficit of about $4.3 million, almost 4.4. So, of course, we can't do that. And so as we knew we were going to have a deficit, we sat back and said, what other funding sources could we possibly have, and what just needs to be deferred? So I'd like to take a moment and just talk to you a little bit about what that means. What is deferred versus ARP, American Rescue Plan money? And again, these deferrals, they do not include any of those personnel requests. Remember, we funded one within the proposed budget. We had 5 others that we have not included, and that is not part of the deferred expenses. So next slide, Armando. So what we have here on the left are deferred expenses versus American Rescue Plan potential funded expenses. On the left, deferred expenses include upgrades to either software, repairs that have been identified that need to be done to buildings, or machinery and equipment. We have identified 6 air conditioning units that need to be replaced throughout city facilities. We should do a citywide fee study. It was last updated in 2010, and so that's a little bit outdated, and we should do that. We have just policies that need to be updated, personnel policies, retention policies, other policies that might require some legal consultation that have not been currently incorporated into the budget. We also want to continue some online service enhancements, outward-facing records management and scanning projects. And so we just don't have the funding to do that at this point. And then we also have some repairs for the Lions Center pool that are not incorporated into the budget, but that we have identified need to be addressed. And so we're looking for some grant funding for that. And then City Hall, over where finance is at, we also have some building repairs that we should probably address in that particular area as well. And then the police department also would really like a fence to augment their security as well at their facility. And so these are not things that we have forgotten about. They're things that we're looking for additional funding. We're seeing if we have additional monies that we find or that we identify during the year as reopening continues, maybe our revenues are a little bit stronger and we can say, you know what, maybe we can do that fence around the police department because we've continued to have issues with vandalism and that area. And so just wanted to bring them to light. I have had one department come and say, I need a little less money. All the rest were more money. And it's because, they continue to get input from employees as the budget process continues or identify things. Remember, we have some new directors and managers that are continuing to learn their operations. And so I'll keep track of all of these kind of deferred expenses. And if there's any that are critical to risk management or providing services, we will certainly try to incorporate them into the budget as early as possible.
Well said. The last few statements, well said. Thank you. Yeah.
The American Rescue Plan money on the right, that is one-time funding. So it's one-time funding and should be considered one-time expenses. So again, we're receiving that in 2 equal payments, one this fiscal year and the other in next fiscal year. do have to utilize those funds by 2024, and it is pending guidance from the U.S. Treasury. So this money is federal money. It's going to, because we're a city under $50,000 in population, the money's going to the state, and then the state will give it to the city. Right now, the U.S. Treasury has provided some very vague, minimal guidance for restricted uses of this money. So it's supposed to be for COVID relief, but they are also restricting the uses of it. So right now, they have told us some broad guidance that you can use it for water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, and broadband infrastructure. So most of these expenses that we've identified are broadband infrastructure in nature, but we have one IT guy. And so we're now trying to figure out how do we implement all of those broadband infrastructures, which would be great for the community and great for us internally for operations with one resource. And so we're hoping that the American Rescue Plan money will also allow us to get Armando some temporary professional assistance to be able to push out those projects, because if they're not done by December 31st of 2024, we could lose the funding, right? And so just kind of thinking through all of those things, it's such a moving target, and just so much to consider as we go forward with this American Rescue Plan money. We always have to remember, no money is free money.
Yeah.
So it all has reporting requirements, it has oversight, it has very specific uses, and so as that guidance gets developed, we will continue to learn and report on that, and bring back some firm projects that we can use that money for.
I do want to correct you, though. You said we have one IT guy. Mondo's not an IT guy. He's an IT wizard. So
He
make sure
is.
that you get that right. Right,
Yes.
Mondo?
He's amazing. I don't know how he does it all, but I do recognize that he cannot do 15 projects at once.
That we know, yeah.
Oh.
The next slide, Armando. Thank you. So, again, we have an upcoming budget study session. We'll be talking about the budget every single council meeting till now, May and June. Next budget study session is on May 18th. And what we'll do is we'll give you a general fund update. If we have any labor negotiation updates, we'll also provide those at that time. We'll also be reviewing all of the special revenue funds. The city has 25 total special revenue funds, and those are funds restricted for capital improvements, law enforcement, services, and then also assessment districts. We'll also be talking about our 2 internal service funds and our 3 enterprise funds, which are water, wastewater, and the airport. And I'd be happy to take any questions or allow you to talk to any one of the other directors or managers and let me take a break.
Yeah. Great job.
Yeah, it was very
Very good.
thorough,
Yeah.
Carla.
I had a
Thank you for putting that together. And
Very thorough.
there's some good news mixed in with the bad news, but I think we're all very encouraged by the new software. I think that's just going to be a game changer for the entire city, especially finance, but just the way all the different departments interact with finance. Anybody got any questions?
I'm very encouraged by the report. Considering COVID, everything else that we've gone through in the last year and a half, it looks better than what I thought it might. And I think that's a testimony to the staff and the departments and the city as a whole. And I think Brawley has done a little bit better than some of the other cities locally because of our distance from the border possibly, and less depending upon those types of revenues. But I think we've done a little bit better than that. I had just a question about reserves and where we're at with that. Go ahead.
So the budget report does talk about reserves and the target, and so it's in the last section, it's on page 41 of the agenda. So the current reserves as of June 30th of 2020 were about $1.7 million, and the target is 15% of expenditures. Based on the current proposed budget, that would mean the target would be 2.5 million. So we are a bit shy there. And again, those expenses will change and increase, and so that target will change and increase as the budget is adopted as
And
well.
I think we kind of knew that we were down a little bit because we had utilized some of that for some of the special needs that we had. I'm assuming that we have a certain amount in the highway funds that were due to relinquishment that came from the state of California to us that's also in kind of like being held kind of to the side. I think we did utilize, did we utilize any of that funding? That we utilized the interest, didn't we?
2 years ago, last year for 1920, it was proposed, and due to all the hard work with staff and monies on the revenue side, we were able not to use that, even though it was in the budget. As you recall, for the 1920 audit, we increased reserves from that was around 2.5 to 3%. I remember exactly, not exactly, but to around 11%. There was an increase in the reserves for 1920.
Okay.
So so we did not use that for 1920. 2021, there's proposed of about $104,000, give or take, and we'll see where that takes us, how we end up at the end of the year.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, thank
To
you.
answer your question, the current balance is about $6.8 million in the highway
6.8 in the highway?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So is there any additional questions before I just, a couple comments?
Just one thing, I asked a few of my questions, so that was it. Just a comment that, again, I think encouraging also is just the timeliness and the amount of, I think, thoughtfulness from the departments and finance going into this. I think it made it pretty clear for us as council and the public to really get a good snapshot, at least of what the past looked like with its impacts and kind of where we're going. So I know it's a living document, more to go, but I think it's a great way to frame the budget season here. So thank you, Carla.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, I think we all feel lucky, and I'm sure anyone that pays attention feels lucky to have you, Carla, and just this new team that's being built. There's so much more confidence in the future and how the city's going to look moving forward. So this was very well done, very well put together.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the fact that you explain everything, and some of the stuff, it doesn't make sense. It's my first year involved with budget, right? And a lot of this it made sense. I have some questions. I'm going to email them to you, though, so hopefully we can bring it back at the next meeting. Just a few questions, but I'll send those in to you.
Yes, and that's a good point. I am available to talk to anyone in the public or any city council member or staff member that has any questions on the budget. I did try to add as many notes as possible. It is extremely complicated. The budget is one of the most complicated things that the city does, and I get it. And try to simplify it as much as possible, but there is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that happens, and so I'm happy to talk to anyone that needs some additional kind of one-on-one discussion to go over any item.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. She could write a book called General Fund for Dummies or something like that.
No fun for dummies.
Even then, it wouldn't be
Yeah,
that
yeah.
easy.
Speak for yourself.
Exactly.
Good job, though.
My,
I appreciate the
My
the
gunnery
effort.
sergeant say just use the KISS method. That works on all of us.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Carla, for that very thorough and really easy to understand language. So that's a great benefit.
It's
for us.
important because that's what
Yeah.
we need, to be quite honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Like, my background's in finance, but even then, city finance is just completely different than our everyday, and, Donnie has extensive experience in business finance. It's just different. So we appreciate it.
And transport.
So, a couple things. A couple of things that I want to reemphasize, Carla did cover. There was a lot of hard work behind the scenes with Carla, departments, back and forth, to bring us into a quote-unquote surplus. A lot of hard work. We had to cut a lot of requests and see where we could gain some efficiencies and cost savings with anticipation of the labor negotiations that are ongoing with 4 bargaining units. We anticipated increase there. While we don't have the exact numbers, it's going to be hefty. So I thought it was important that we do all we can to get close as we can to again, a quote, balanced budget. A lot of hard efforts from everybody that you see in the audience there, department heads and Carla and even staff for that matter. The other thing to emphasize is we are going back to quote normalcy. We're going to be open. We're going to provide a lot of services that haven't been offered in the short-term past here. Matter of fact, if you remember last year's painful budget sessions, we were proposing to, having to eliminate or curtail some of those services. we're going the other direction for this next year. We're going to be offering close to the year before of everything that we were offering before. That's our goal. Staff is coming to us with reopening plans across the board, every department.
That's awesome.
And we are going to be a full-service
Awesome.
full-service organization, agency to our citizens here that deserve it. But with that comes a cost.
Yes.
So we understand that, and I know council understands that, but I think the public should know that we are getting back to where we were before as far as services, and we're going to make every effort to do that the most efficient way possible. With that, those are all I have to offer on the budget. The next go-around, we'll have those labor estimates for you and how that will affect the budget overall. And with that, that's all I have, unless there's any additional questions.
I don't have any.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. All right, with that, we will move on to item 5, which is a city manager report. We're kind of shifting the agenda around a little bit. And 5A is a residential development fee study findings. Take it away, Tyler.
Thank you, Mayor. In my new role as city manager since September, a positive thing I would say is there's been a ton of increase in new businesses, new developments, interest of coming to Brawley to do work here, whether it's a new business or subdivisions or infill lots, what have you. I mean, just the broad spectrum, and a lot of new different types of businesses. So that was encouraging. But through my numerous conversations with these groups, developers, the infill contractors, like I said, and groups representing either new businesses or industries, the one common theme that they all had that was relayed to me is that the city of Brawley has the highest fees in the valley. In my short term as the finance director, I was always having a hard time because I had heard that anecdotally as a finance director, but now directly as the city manager, and it just did not, I couldn't jive it in my accounting brain how that could be possible, and I kept asking, how can you show me that? Let's, finally at this one meeting that we had recently, probably about 2 weeks ago, with a developer consultant representative, I asked this person, show me, please show me. If it's true, it's true, but I want to see it. So he happened to be a board member of DVBA, which is the Desert Valley Builders Association. He contacted the CEO and one of the other representatives there, and they sent me an email that showed a graph that you'll see here shortly that shows us the highest. I called and I said, I still don't buy it. That's a page. We need to sit down. Let's talk about it. So we met, and they brought, there was this Desert Valley Builders Association, a residential development fee study that's 111 plus pages of Coachella Valley and the Imperial Valley, showing that we were the highest. Mondo, if you could, the next slide there. If you can't read that, that is $44,000 fees that shows Brawley the highest. And so during this conversation, I printed up just a one-page sheet. I said, here's what we charge, guys. This is what we charge. And they took that, and they're like, okay, we'll go back and look at the numbers. And what I found out is during my research is there was a study done 2010, 2011 on impact fees and capacity fees. Well, that's what they were using as their basis, was just that fully implemented.
And we never fully impleted.
Exactly.
I've said that for 8 years, whatever. So it's like,
Exactly.
I don't know why this is news, I don't.
Exactly. And in this 44,000, what's made up of it is mostly impact fees, but it's also building permit fees, planning fees, engineering fees, et cetera. So they took the information back. Well, they're going to have to revise what the city of Brawley is.
Tyler, just so you know, we've heard this multiple times.
Okay.
I've heard it multiple times, and it's always the same argument. Yeah, if it was fully implemented, maybe that's true, but they haven't been, and they never were.
Yeah.
And they're not today. And so that is what we just haven't marketed that fact maybe strongly enough, And that sort of discussion happens all the time. So I get a little fired up when I hear it, but I'm telling you, I've been saying this for years.
Well,
It's not-
that's why we're here, because
Yeah.
I want the public, I want everybody to know where exactly we stand. And based on what we're actually charging, what council had decided to implement, we're at 30,000, which puts us in the lower 50% of the agencies in Imperial County. And believe me, George, Councilmember Nava, this message is going to get out now, because now when I sit with all these people, I have this to show them. I said, this is not right.
It's not
and this
accurate.
And this is why. And DVBA has, they're going to do an amendment. They're going to do an amendment to this book that they've been handing out to people. This is a new study, came out March of 2021, and they're willing to work with us, and they're going to revise. They're going to revise that based on what they know now. So I thought it was important that everybody gets this message that, hey, we have a lot to work on in the city of Brawley. We're working on it, but the fact that the statement that the fees are higher than anywhere else is just not true.
Yeah.
And so that's my city manager report in a nutshell, and I just wanted to have that presented. So
I'm glad you took that initiative, and I'm glad that you challenged them on that. You know, I know the DVBA, they've supported me in the past, I support them, but they also influence people. And if it's causing a negative influence for people to develop here, that's an issue. So I'm glad it's being addressed.
Yep.
And I want to point out that once they had the facts, that they're working with us too. It's not like they're fighting us on it now.
Sure.
That they that they have what
Good.
exactly is going on as far as details.
Right, and I agree too, and I think that Councilmember Nava and myself have been here the longest, and basically, we've argued this all along, that when we look at the comparison of our fees to the other cities, and we've always asked for those kind of comparisons, that we come out somewhere right about where we're at right
Yeah.
now. We may be a little higher on some, a little lower on some, but we come out on the average about where we're at right now. Well, I think we've always insisted upon that, but I think everybody comes in saying, oh, no, your fees are always higher. But when I check with the other cities, their fees are higher. And so we never could get that down, but I think this will probably finally end that kind of talk, and maybe we'll go forward from there.
And I think it's also important to note that fees are fees, right? And so all cities are different. We can't compare ourselves to any city. Everybody has different infrastructure needs, development needs, whatever it is, right? They're all different. We're all different. Yeah, but I mean, there is a tendency for us to compare and say, okay, us against El Centro or Imperial, or what do we look like in comparison? So I've heard that so many times from developers about, you know, the cost of doing business in Brawley. And, you know, it goes back to, you know, our messaging in the past 6 months and how we're looking to improve business opportunities here. We're looking to expand opportunities here. We're looking to work with developers, and that goes from every single department within our city, starting with the city manager's office, Public Works, everybody else who's involved. And it also, I mean, I'm glad that this is being said because, again, it goes back to messaging and marketing what our city does. And so we do have a social media platform that we can do, that we can use. We just have to make sure that we're highlighting all of the benefits of doing business in Brawley.
Yeah.
And I don't know we've done that well. So, no, I appreciate it. And Sam brings up a good point, you know, so.
Here a long time. The other thing is that we've always worked with the developers, like some of them wanted to pay fees up front, some of them wanted to defer them over time. I
Absolutely.
think we've always worked on an individual basis with developers, depending upon what they're bringing to the table versus what the city is trying to bring to the table. We've even waived fees for some people in some developments.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to note too. So you can't really say that this is this way and it doesn't ever change or anything else. It does, it varies all over
But
the
this
whole
is the
county.
this is the baseline. and
It is a
basis.
baseline.
Yes,
But
yeah.
and going back to something Sam said, and I'm going to roll here, so I want to share it. But for years, we've heard this, that Brawley is hard to do business in, that it's the most challenging city to do business in, and we got that reputation over a course of time. Some of it was justified, some of it wasn't, right? But I think I can speak for all of us here, because this is our messaging, is that we're open for business. We are open for business, and we want to make sure people understand that this is one huge identifier, right? Just identifying the fact that we're not the highest, you know, and we're near, you know, somewhere in the middle, but we're open for business.
Yeah.
I think all of us have been saying this for a long time, and we have had that reputation.
George, that's what I was going to say. I think that's been the biggest turnaround related to this topic, obviously, is just that fact. And Tyler, I think he just framed this just right by saying we are already seeing the movement that's going on. And even some of this we dealt with the challenge of some of this misinformation or disinformation. And I think part of the challenge on that is when it's, trade associations, and there's going to be a tendency to believe that data or information maybe versus what we may be sharing, which is very public, right? And we've talked about it as mentioned. And in my almost 9 years, that schedule was passed, but I was part of those early discussions when we were still basically every year contemplating, are we going to move or not move? And we've held serve for the very reason of what we're talking about right now. So if you look at cost of living adjustments, cost of doing business, inflation, all those things, I think it's a huge message that we need to highlight, that we have not done that, because we are open for business, and at the same time we have to be sensitive to the cost of doing business, right? We just had this discussion with the general fund workshop. It's not cheap to run a city. And I think there's an expectation that's set of being a full-service community, full-service city. And so I think the right balance has to be struck, and I think it's shown here. What I'd like to see is just the continued growth, nice, steady growth, right. Controlled growth, and the right kind of growth, right? And I think that's what we're all after, so.
No, I appreciate this, Tyler, because being, so new to council, right, not having the experience that you gentlemen have in dealing with folks coming in and out, I'm fielding a lot of these calls where they're complaining about Brawley being the most difficult city to do businesses, the most difficult city to build in, the threats of never doing business in Brawley again. I just took this call just a week and a half ago, but I sat on it because I like to see numbers, I like to see facts before I say anything, right? And I think this matters. I mean, this says a lot to the community and to I get it. Every developer I've ever met looks at the bottom line, and if they can have a fee waived, save $2,000, $3,000 here and there, I get it. I have my own little business, and I got to do the same thing. Everywhere I can, I got to cut costs. But this makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you doing the work because I have a tool now to defend myself. And if there's something excessive or something that we can question, then obviously we'll do that. But at the same time, we want to let you guys do your job every day. I don't want to be calling every other day with the complaint that is just not true. And we're looking at the numbers here, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
And just two last comments, if I may, Mayor. Again, I want to emphasize this, that there was no ill intent on DVBA. They were just running with what they had.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
And so I want to reemphasize that. And I did let them know that, hey, I'm gonna be setting the record straight. So so I want to make that clear. But one last comment that Council Member Wharton had mentioned about full service. What I found very interesting when I'm talking to JPIA through the budget process with Carla about our increase in liability and workers' comp potentially coming. Yeah. There is, JPIA is a vast organization here that's pooled for agencies. Well, when you talk about, they break it down into general, and then they have public safety as when the breakdown's more talking about costs. Yep. And I'll get there to the point. But under general liability and worker comp, the shared pool is like 135, 140 agencies. When you go to public safety, the pool for full service agencies is down to like 26 or so. There's not a lot of full full service agencies anymore in California. And I tell you what, we're probably in the Valley, included the agencies down here, we're one of the smallest that still offer those kinds of things. And so I think that's important to emphasize.
We're a big city in a small package. Yep. I mean, I've always said that. We have every division with the exception of trash, and that's outsourced, but everything else we do. Yeah. Everything else. Yeah. We treat our own water, we treat our own wastewater, we do public works, we do road improvements, we have an engineering department, we have, we do contract with our city attorney, but we have a city attorney. who's working for the city. You know, so we have every single department, Parks and Rec, we have library services. You know,
Airport, hospital.
Airport.
That's
and-
a healthcare district, not
Right?
ours, but.
Yeah, and the healthcare district's not a city one, but it's still a great partner to the city. So it's, everything is under this larger, you know, umbrella, but we're just we're a much smaller operation, you know, and so and that costs money.
Yes.
It costs money to be able to provide, so it's not cheap, but, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As was said, Tyler, we do appreciate you going to bat on that, because to me, it's frustrating, and I sense some frustration from you on this, in that it's not just, it's one thing if it's hearsay, and this is the rumor, this is what everyone says is the case, but when it's a written document that's dropped on different people's desks that says, this is where Brawley is, or the highest of, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, libelous almost, to have that in printed form without doing the research to find out what the true numbers are. And so I appreciate you, you know, bulldogging that until the truth came out on it, because it's not right.
You know, consultants only know what they know. They're only can go with the information that was provided
Sure.
to them. So, you know, in their defense, I wouldn't say it was, you know, wasn't any ill intent. It was just they didn't have the right basis, the right information. And I said, in the future, if you got questions, get a hold of me.
Yeah.
We will straighten it out, or we'll explain to you what we're doing on anything.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to emphasize there wasn't
Well,
no.
I think the full positive is how you phrase it, is that people know, and builders know. I think they're coming.
Yes, it's true.
I'm fielding more positive input on doing business or opening business here. And this has been through the pandemic, some of the most difficult times, but I think the city experience has rapidly changed in a good way. So the word's out.
Yeah, and that goes along with what you said, Tyler. I mean,
Yeah.
you are the gateway of information on a lot of this stuff, and if you don't know it, you're going to find out what it is and get back to them, and we really do appreciate that you have just taken so many of these issues by the horns and just, you know, you're making stuff happen, and this is one of those things where it's like that information is now public, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, but again, it's not a one-man show. It's a
Sure.
team. So
We understand.
Yeah. Team building.
Okay.
And just
All
a
right.
point of clarification, I said city attorney. Somebody thought I said shitty attorney, so I just, you're a good city attorney, brother, you know, so, yeah.
I have a good.
On to item 6, regular business.
Yeah, I needed to clarify it, you know, so.
I need to bang my gavel.
Yeah, bang the gavel.
6A, update on City of Brawley declaration of local emergency as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. This will be an overall outlook presented by our fire chief, the one, the only Mike York.
Good evening, Mayor Hamby, members of the council, and city staff. In a interest of brevity, the COVID-19 update tonight, we'll keep it short. As usual, the emergency is continued along with the state's declaration. I do encourage all members of the public to keep track of those Imperial County dashboards. It's very interesting and very applicable information for day-to-day life living underneath this pandemic situation. Most notably, our blueprint for a safer economy. As mentioned a few times in this council meeting, the governor has stated June 15th as a quote-unquote fully reopening of the economy. We are still awaiting what those guidelines are going to look like, what fully reopened really means. What we're looking at locally, we're still well within the orange tier. Our numbers, as shown on the Imperial County website, we trended back down, so we're well within the orange or moderate tier. There was some question on our last update that our numbers were actually briefly outside of that tier, however, we were not reassigned. The alternative care site, which was originally placed at IVC and was moved to Imperial Valley Expo Fairgrounds, still remains in a warm status. There's been no patients diverted to that location. Brawley Fire and EMS response stays static and the same. Vaccinations. On April 24th, the CDC and the WHO removed their recommendation for pausing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so that is now back as an alternative. There is a health warning for a 3-week self-evaluation period for threats of blood clots, etc. However, here in the Imperial Valley, we have achieved 109,000 vaccine administrations. 64,000 people in our county are 44,000 persons in our county are now fully vaccinated. And the guidelines are now, of course, 16 and up are all eligible as of April 15th. As always, we're working with our local, state, and federal partners here within the city at the direction of our city manager. All departments are looking at reopening plans, and we're trying to put those in writing and have those available. So we're up and running whenever June 15th, or our guidelines hit. If there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Good information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Now we
Thank you, Chris.
Now we begin the next part of the program, which is the Guillermo Cias Show. Item 6B, there's going to be 3 items that Guillermo's going to talk to us about. Item 6B is discussion and potential action to award project number 2021-02, water treatment plant valve actuator replacement to Cora Constructors Incorporated for $961,000, and authorize a 10% contingency of $96,100 for a total amount of $1,057,100, and authorize the city manager to execute all documentation. Backup is on pages 76 to 79.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Guillermo Sillas, Public Works Director. This item is a continuation of the item that was approved for the design of the replacement of these actuators and large valves for the water treatment plant. Now is the turn for the construction, and that's the reason for the item to award this contract to Cora Construction to perform to build this or replace these actuators and large valves in the amount of $961,000 plus a contingency of 10% for a total of $1,057,100. We received 4 bids, and Cora Construction was the lowest responsible bidder. And so that's the item to present to you. Any questions that you have? There?
Guillermo, my only, just out of curiosity, without doing the side-by-side comparison, just when you see a $250,000 disparity, I mean, that's good. That's quite a bit less than the next bid, but is there, what's the big difference? Is it labor rates, components?
Is there a breakdown on how they bid this project? Both right?
Yeah, well, that's it.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's where you see the difference.
Usually
Right,
there is.
but
I just-
unfortunately, there's not, during the bid process, there's not a lot of breakdown to be able to know what exactly is, because these large items, like, for example, supply and install 30 or 40 inches bulb. Once we award the contract, we will require scheduled values, and they will break it down by labor, by material, equipment, things like that. But until then, we don't know exactly what's because the way that the bid schedule was prepared is not in great detail. It's like, for example, when you are going to install a water line, so you don't break it down by little pieces, just by linear foot, right? Or so.
Yeah, I understood that. I just wondered in the bid if you noticed if there was anything.
Right.
like that.
Yeah. We know that there's, but sometimes contractors they sacrifice certain maintenance on equipment, or maybe they have a strong area that they are able to reduce because whatever reason they prefer to work. And instead of making a large profit, they prefer to continue working.
Yeah, just to stay
different
busy.
reasons.
It keeps them, yeah, there's different motivations of why. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Guillermo, also, I think what looks like they're the closest to being a local firm that we could get, it looks like Palm Desert I think is where they're from. The other ones are further away. That could be some reason
helps.
for the discrepancy in
Yeah.
cost
Right.
also of
Yes.
moving construction equipment or moving people or doing different things might be an issue where Palm Desert, they can probably come down and go home in the same day. In those other places, they're
Right.
going to have to do lodging and everything else.
Right.
So that could
And
be
that's an
some reason
expense.
for the discrepancy
I believe
in-
that-
in bidding.
I'm sorry. I believe that Cora Construction performed a work for the city of Brawley long time ago, before our time here.
Okay.
But I believe, probably, I don't know, they are familiar or they have labor that are local. We don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
no, because there could be a variety of reasons.
Right.
As long as we oversight it, as long as we get what we're paying for, and as long as it does the job, I think that's what our biggest concerns are with all of these kinds of awards. And there's no telling. I mean, they could fail on a contract. Anybody could. But we just have to monitor that and make sure that we try to get it done correctly and that everything is done on the up and up. And they may have a way to cut costs that we're not aware of.
Right, exactly. We have a design company, a consultant that will help us with during the submittal review process, and also they will provide construction management services. So they will be inspecting the job very close. Plus, our own people
Your own
from the
people,
city
yeah.
will be monitoring that.
Does that include labor compliance?
Yes, it is included.
All right.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve this project award?
This is George. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I heard Sam on that one. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item carries. Item 6C, discussion and potential action to approve the wastewater treatment plant blowers overhaul in the amount not to exceed $20,830.25, plus a contingency to be determined in the field once they remove the equipment to Atlas Copco. Is also presented by Guillermo Cias. Backup is on pages 80 through 87.
Mr. Mayor, I have read the backup material. There is no further discussion from council. I would like to make a motion to approve the item.
Okay, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item carries. Item 6D, discussion and potential action to approve resolution number 2021- resolution of the City Council of the City of Brawley, California, to incorporate a list of projects funded by SB 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act, also presented by Guillermo Cias, on pages 88 to 91.
Yes, this is an item that is our 5th year that we receive funds from the program SB1. And this time is to provide the list that is required to be able to allocate the funds according to the rules and regulations of this act, and to be able to accrue the money from the Road Repair and Accountability Act, and the project that was selected based on conditions and streets that require rehabilitation since that was prepared since 2014. These funds will be applied to 3rd Street from A Street to River Drive, which is in need of those repairs. And so we need to approve this resolution from City Council to be able to submit it to CTC and to get the approval. Any questions?
Yep. I have no questions. Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
All right.
George, I'll second that.
You second?
I'll second
Go
that.
ahead.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item carries.
Thank you.
Good, Guillermo.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6E, discussion and potential action to approve resolution number 2021- resolution of the City Council of the City of Brawley, California, adopting the City of Brawley COVID-19 Supplemental Paid Sick Leave Policy, or SPSL. This will be presented by our wonderful Personnel and Risk Management Administrator, Shirley Bonias. Backup is
Wonderful.
on pages 92 through 98.
There's your introduction.
Thank you, Mayor.
She's got a golden
Council
tongue.
members, Shirley Bonias, Personnel and Risk Management. Thank you for the compliment. Before you is a state mandate, Senate Bill 95. COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave policy. Unlike the emergency paid sick leave that we had mandated from the feds, this is coming from the state. This one does incorporate all employees. So if it's a call paid firefighter or a temporary employee working for us 2 hours a week, it all mandates that we provide sick leave and approximately 2 weeks worth of sick leave. So if they work 2 days a week at 8 hours each, that's 16. 16 times 2 is 32. We would mandate 32 hours towards them. And the list of items that they could use it for is all COVID related, but it's just not the sickness. It's also attempting to get a vaccine and also any symptoms you might get after you get the vaccine. So it's a mandate again, unknown if we can use some of the American Rescue Plan Act. I think we can allocate some of the funds that way, and it's retroactive to January 1st. So personnel is waiting for council's approval to adopt this policy. I will then send the policy and the form to all employees, and they can, if they've been sick since January 1st, 2021, they could submit to have that leave rebanked, whatever leave they might have used for this purpose.
And the costs are minimal?
What I could recall from memory, sir, is probably at this point 3 employees that I know of that were out. But I don't see every timesheet, I don't process payroll.
Right.
But what I'm aware of with COVID is about 2 to 3 employees that were out for either their child or quarantined or had a reaction to a vaccine.
And sure, like you said, to cover even temp workers or 2 hours a week. So if that is the case, potentially, let's say this summer, that 80 hours of leave or whatever, it looked like pretty significant. There's a bucket there. That individual's quarantine, is it 2 hours is what the leave is covering?
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
absence?
It's what
it's not-
you're scheduled to work
It's
in
not
those 2 weeks.
augmenting their compensation.
Right,
okay.
exactly.
Okay.
It's just
I assume that, but yeah.
And
I
how long
just
is this
didn't read.
into, I mean, is this in, how long will it take, wait, is it set to expire at any point?
Yeah, it's set to expire in September. September
there it is.
30th, yeah,
So it's a limited,
2021.
so it's a limited time.
January 1st to September 30th, 2021. So it's not the entire year like we had with the, well, we had 9 months under emergency paid sick leave as well.
I don't think we have any choice, do we?
But a signed policy is better than a not approved
Correct,
policy.
correct.
So
I
I
get it,
always
I get
go that way, bring it to council's attention, allow the governing body to approve this, please, and then I can get it out to staff.
Fantastic. Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the item.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Item carries. Before you leave, Shirley, could you give us item 7, the departmental report, which is a monthly staff report for May 2021?
Yes,
Back up on page 99.
I'll be glad to, Mayor. Great news, we do have a library manager, signed his appointment and letter.
Okay.
And had glowing remarks when I called about references. So from his going to be soon former employer, he Desi, and I will not pronounce his first name properly, so I won't even go there. I'll go by his nickname. Desi Rodriguez will be joining us May 17th.
Okay.
Chris Carter will assist in the handoff, and we'll get some reopened plans soon out of the library. So that's positive news.
Where is he coming from?
He's right now living in the Chatsworth area. He's working at a charter school.
But he is homegrown. He's from Brawley.
Brawley.
Yeah, the
He
name
wants to
sounds
come
familiar.
home. He wants to come home.
Tennessee?
Okay.
No, Chatsworth, California.
California.
That's where.
California.
It's
He's
up
up in
north.
north, he's in just north of LA.
Oh, okay.
San
I'm not
Evan,
familiar.
thank you.
He's coming
He
home.
wants to come home. He's a born and raised Brawley boy.
A lot of people are coming back to Brawley, you know?
Yep, they
I'm
are.
telling you.
It's
So-
a call to come home.
Yeah,
Gotta
it's
go.
a call to come home. There we go.
It's like salmon.
There you go.
The unfortunate news, though, comes out of PD. We had a dispatcher start on a Monday and quit by Friday. So unfortunately, we're back down to dispatchers. We've held massive interviews for police officers. We've got quite a few candidates that are local in backgrounds, quite a few being more than one. And hopefully dispatcher Chief, do we have one still in background? Okay, we have one in background. So we're calling for applications for dispatchers as well. Any other questions I can answer
Stressful position.
on the
Many people
report?
in.
No?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Shirley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 8, city council member reports. We will begin with Councilman Castro.
Oh, okay, let me go back. Actually took notes this time.
All right.
Thanks to Carla. There's a lot of numbers thrown our way. And I don't have that finance background, right? So it's a little tricky. I have to pay a lot of attention, very close attention to all that information. Yeah, it's been a couple busy weeks. The first thing, as Mr. Ortiz mentioned earlier, we were called in by the Downtown Merchants Association, as I'm sure you guys have dealt with them in the past. They're trying to revive this organization. I went down there to the Brawley Creamery. I heard what they had to say. A lot of optimism. You know, some old school folks saying we've tried this and done this, but a lot of young folks there saying they want to be active, they want to help, they want to work with the city, with the Chamber of Commerce, with elected officials and anyone that they can to improve the conditions downtown and to help their businesses flourish. So, I told them that, like George, Councilman Nava said earlier, we're open for business. We're willing to help in any way that we can. If we need to sit in and just listen, then we can do that. Also, our city manager, Tyler, Mr. Salcido, attended the meeting. It's very positive because it allowed us to, just kind of quiet down some of those rumors, some of the negativity that's out there in the community. We're able to answer questions and just kind of just put the facts out there. And I think that's important, which leads me to my next point. There have been a lot of calls, a lot of complaints about businesses and homes being broken into and the crime and the fact that we can't put people in jail. So, I did my homework. I called to our state representatives to see where that mandate was coming from. It's not from the state. I then met with our sheriff's office, with Under Sheriff Fred Miramontes, who then, clarified that comes from the Supreme Court of California. Initially, they issued that mandate to not allow folks to, be picked up unless it was a serious crime. After the 90 days were over, they then pushed that down to the counties. So our Superior Court justices here have decided to continue that policy, and that is the reason that we are where we are. So there is some more information that I'm going to discuss with the mayor as soon as we have an opportunity, with the city manager and the police chief. But I did do my homework because I get tired of hearing the rumors. I get tired of hearing all that false information and the fact that it's being politicized. I take some offense to that. So I think it is my responsibility and our responsibility as elected officials to also do our legwork. And that's what I did. So tomorrow, hopefully, we can follow up with that meeting. That's all I have to report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good legwork there. Councilmember Nava, please.
Just very briefly, did manage to take a short tour with some members of staff at the Brawley Senior Center. And so there's plans to reopen that, as our city manager stated. And, it's one of many things that are going to be reopening here soon. I think we recently posted a job announcement for a temporary hire there. And so it's just one of many of the services that really are important to people. And I received a video from some of the seniors that participate at that center. I did forward it along to the city council. But it's just a messaging of just their need and desire to be back and active. I do think that we're at a point now where, I certainly feel safer, and I think people do in general. And so we're going out and engaging ourselves a lot more in the public eye. In fact, tomorrow we are participating in a local ribbon cutting, which we haven't done in a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's more of the back to normal, if you will, So I'm excited about that. I do think that, honestly, we are on a roll as a city. The city of Brawley, with our staff and everybody else, we do have a lot of new faces here, but we've got really good people hired, some new people, some new momentum, and good staff that's been in development and in the work. So, we're strongly positioned to do great things. As our city manager has said, we are going to be opening many departments And going back to a comment that Councilmember Castro said, it's like, the rumors and other things, because there is misinformation that comes out here. One example of it was tonight with the unfortunate use of maybe incorrect figures that may, prevent people from wanting to develop here. But here's my message, is that the message is up to us. I've said this for years and years, and we're finally at the point where we're doing it. I've been preaching, social media and trying to get that messaging out there. We're finally doing it. And quite honestly, it's up to us. If we don't message that ourselves as a city, as a council, as staff, nobody's going to do it for us. And if we don't tell the story, somebody else is going to tell it for us. So if we want to get the message out that we are in business, that we're doing all of these things, it's up to us. And if we don't do that, they're going to tell the story for us. So either we beat them to the punch and we become our own newspaper, or somebody else is telling the story that we are not engaged in and that we're not behind.
Yeah.
So it's important that we continue down this path. And I know that there's really good things that the city does every single day that are not publicized. We need to be better at telling that story. And we have great departments. We have a police department. We have a fire department. We have all these departments to include our city attorney, right? And so, but we have all of these great things moving forward, and we just need to, quite honestly, focus in on the fact that we've got good people working for the city of Brawley. There's over 125 employees here. That means a lot of vested interest in making sure that this place operates really well. Let's just emphasize that effort. We're doing it now. Like, I'm pumped up. You guys see it. You guys have seen it for weeks. You're pumped up. Councilmember Castro, Councilmember Wharton, Mayor Hamby, Councilmember Couchman, we're all excited. Staff, I'm seeing people excited because I hear from staff, and they're excited about the things that we're doing. So let's just keep on with that momentum, and let's be cool. Let's just get things done. We've talked about so many things for so long, and we haven't done them because we've honestly kicked the can down the road, and we're not doing that anymore. So I hate to sit here and kind of go on a soapbox, but just the comments that I'm hearing, let's just get it done. We're doing it. Let's just keep on going, So anyway, that's my report. So
It's a motivational speech in a report. That's
hey,
great.
maybe both, right? So
Thank you, George. Councilman Wharton.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just briefly met with a check-in, a one-to-one meeting with the CEO of PMH, and it was actually specific to the event I think Councilmember Nava was referencing tomorrow, which I think we've all been invited, and members of, obviously, our city representation, staff, all public. But it's really a big deal. I just want to echo. It was a very positive meeting because one of the public safety resources that I'm affiliated with that operates helicopters, I'll try to keep it nameless, will be participating in supporting that event. But this is the first regional Imperial County cath lab, which is they're referred to in short. And it's really a game changer for those with, that need coronary artery intervention. So that's typically something you would have to be flown out of Imperial County for. So to have that capability here, it's going to save lives, and it's going to improve the quality of lives. So it should be a very exciting event tomorrow. I know it's Cinco de Mayo. All the more reason to celebrate, but even to come by and opportunity to tour, I'm sure, or even just get a little information on it. So that was a good meeting. Look forward to it tomorrow, and that's my report.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sam Couchman.
I would like to apologize in advance. I will not be able to attend that meeting. I'm engaged in some medical issues with a family member, so I will not be at that. And so I know that my fellow council people will be there representing me very well. And so, and I'm probably the one that benefits the most because I have had the benefit of being flown out on the helicopter to San Diego to have the catheter type things done and the stents put in. And so I understand the need for this. It's great to have the facility here, especially at Pioneers. It is something I'm looking forward to, and I think it will save lives, and I think that's extremely important to everyone here that resides in the valley, and certainly to have immediate service and to have immediate medical intervention is a very positive thing. The fact that we're flown out is a great thing too, because we do get good medical services that way, and it works out just fine, but this is even better. So I think
just don't say you're looking forward to it, though. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not looking forward to it.
That's what you said.
No, I'm not looking forward to it. And also I was going to say we might save some money if we didn't do the blowers for the thing and we used a certain council member just attached to him, then it might be able to, I'm not going to mention any names, but. Okay, but, and so on that, I will say that I've been around and seen more of the vaccinations going on. It does appear like more and more people are getting vaccinated. I think that's a positive thing for our city and for the county in general. I see Vaughn's doing them on an ongoing basis. I see Dr. Vo, most of the Valley Medical pioneers, everybody's involved in that, and they're doing that, and they're getting it done, and I think that's a great thing for our city and for the Valley and for stopping this COVID-type situation, or at least dampening it down to the point where we can get back to some normalcy. So I'm seeing them do that. They're doing it on a regular basis. I think that's important. I do think we have enough vaccines, or we're getting to where we have enough, and I think they are getting out there to the people. If you want one, you can get one, and I think that's the important part of that. And I want to appreciate the staff today for this budget information. It's very, very important. I think it's important as we move forward. I think it's going to be important for the renewal of the utility tax and some of the issues related to that. And if we can maintain this momentum, I think we can do well with both budget and operation of our full-service city. And as we reopen, I think we'll find that that's going to happen also. And so here we go. So with that, that's my report. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. I sat in a Zoom Imperial County Public Health Department COVID update along with City Manager Tyler Salcido. Sometimes I turn on the camera and sometimes I don't, but Tyler's always on camera, so appreciate that. I was honored to present the proclamation for autism awareness this past week to the Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District Board, to CEO Larry Lewis, and just in appreciation for the awareness that they're bringing as well. They light it up blue now every year and put up some nice banners and posters. I got to participate on Sunday along with my family in a fundraiser parade for a young man here in Brawley. His name's Ian, and he has a disease called adrenoleukodystrophy. And it's robbing him of basically every function of his body. And so a very kind-hearted person named Patty McDonald had put together a GoFundMe fundraiser for him to purchase a wheelchair access van. And then Katie Santillan and Ivy Respite stepped up and put a large chunk of money toward that secretly, without the family knowing about it, to be able to purchase the van much quicker than the track that they were on. And so then between those individuals and the Autism Support of Imperial County and Best Step Forward and some other individuals, they put together this fundraiser parade, treated it as a surprise to the family. They thought it was just a fundraiser. You know, people were going to drive by, honk and wave and drop money in a box or give through the GoFundMe account. But as it turned out, they asked for the use of a police unit and a fire engine, a ladder truck, to both stop traffic for this parade, and there was multiple car clubs involved and a bunch of different community members. But they parked the fire engine to where the family couldn't see the other side of it, and then put the van on the other side of the fire engine. And so I made some remarks, and I sang a song for Ian, and Katie Santillan made some remarks, and it was just a beautiful event. And then they moved the fire truck, kind of like what you'd see on a TV show, and the van was there, and it was just very, very heartwarming, very touching event. And so I wanted to recognize those individuals that I mentioned, Patty McDonald and Katie Santillan, Ivy Respite, the Autism Support of Imperial County, Best Step Forward, and local advocate Gloria Brambila for raising awareness, and also she's the one that brought that event to my attention. And then I was invited to make some comments at that, and it was just it was just neat to see our community rally around someone in need like that. Basically without a van like that, his mom was not able to getting to the point where she couldn't lift him and put him in a regular car. So when they, showed off the van, the door opens automatically, the ramp comes out, at the push of a button, and she rolls him in. It was just very cool to see. So I was thrilled to be a part of that. And this whole past month of April with autism awareness, it's it's really been brought more to the forefront of my attention anyway. And I appreciate the different individuals and organizations within our city and the city of Brawley itself for each year making that proclamation. And not that this was an autism-specific event, but just these different organizations rallied around this young man and his family. So it's things like this that really make me appreciate living in Brawley and the community that we have here. And I really want to give my deep appreciation to the fire department and the police department for being involved in that as well. So that's it for my report. Thank you, gentlemen, for the hard work that you're doing for our city. Thank you, city staff, and especially Carla for that presentation this evening. That was very informative. Your speaking style it's easy to listen to and understand, and we appreciate that because the finance can be a very dry subject. So the PowerPoint is good.
We all stayed awake by the
Yes, yes.
The pictures were.
It's exciting.
Were helpful, yeah.
We're counting money.
There was a lot of good news in there. Yeah.
Who gets bored with counting money?
When you have month left over at the end of your money, it's not a good feeling. I can tell you that from experience.
And Mr. Mayor, maybe an early shout out to all our Brawley mothers, right, coming up
That's
this
right.
weekend.
That's right. Happy Mother's Day to my mom, to my wife, and to all the other ladies that have children or that help other people take care of their children, because it takes a village. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 9, City Attorney Report, since Tyler's already given his update.
That is city attorney.
Yeah.
So the last 2 weeks has been a lot of involvement with the League of Cities. I'm on the City Attorney's Appellate Advocacy Committee, and we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and then this last Friday was the first Friday of the annual or semi-annual City Attorneys Conference, which is usually you go somewhere, but now you just zoom in on Friday mornings for several Fridays in a row. But it's important stuff. They keep track of what's happening in the courts that affect cities, and we all need to know that. And I can tell you it's in Calapat, one of the things I learned on there saved us a big problem. So it's really important to participate in that. That's what we're doing on Friday. And then Shirley's keeping me busy, Marilyn's keeping me busy, Tyler's keeping me busy. So I'm good.
Good deal.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Item 10, City Clerk Report. Nothing to report. All right, with that, we will move into item 11, closed session. Maybe take a little break. Thank you for watching.